media are on high alert here in Washington. It was the day the House was going to vote on greenlighting the impeachment probe of President Biden, and happened to be the day that Hunter Biden was supposed to show up under subpoena to testify behind closed doors. Suddenly, the cable news networks were throwing up banners. Hunter Biden expected to testify before committee, and unclear whether Hunter Biden will testify. And boom, there was the president's son, who had insisted on testifying in public, talking to reporters.
For 6 years, I have been the target of the unrelenting Trump attack machine, shouting, "Where's Hunter?" Well, here's my answer. I am here. In the depths of my addiction, I was extremely irresponsible with my finances. But to suggest that is grounds for an impeachment inquiry is beyond the absurd. It's shameless.
So Hunter was using the media mob to try to turn the tables on the Republican committee and make the case that he was ready to testify before the cameras, knowing full well the panel had rejected the offer. And for all his talk about transparency, Hunter Biden took no questions. I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. Turns out Hunter Biden had his say, and so did Jim Comer, the oversight chairman, while being pressed by Washington Post reporter and MSNBC contributor Jackie Alamany.
Republicans do not want an open process where Americans can see their tactics.
Chairman Comer, do you acknowledge that you haven't answered that question and that you found no evidence of wrongdoing or criminal conduct?
We found some very serious evidence that you look at. No. The checks. There's 2 checks to Joe Biden from his brother. You have to touch it. No. Listen.
Loan repayments.
No, you don't understand loan documents. I do.
So you're accusing Joe Biden's attorneys of inventing
the law firm that represented all the shell companies. That represented all the shell companies.
You think those lawyers have?
What do you think? You're defending them.
So if Republicans have a bunch of false facts, why didn't Hunter walk into Congress like he was supposed to today and set the facts straight? Hunter just read a speech his lawyer wrote and went to lunch.
While Republicans are focused on exacting revenge for, I don't know, something, they're failing to do actual critical to national security kind of work.
A sob story on Capitol Hill today. Hunter Biden wants you to know that he's a poor, helpless victim of what is a new, vast right-wing conspiracy, and that neither he nor his father should ever be held accountable.
There has been no evidence yet presented at Luce, none whatsoever. This is about Donald Trump next year not wanting to be the only candidate on the ballot who's been impeached.
By day's end, the House voted to authorize the impeachment inquiry on a strict party line vote. All 221 Republicans saying yes, all 212 Democrats saying no. Joining us now to analyze the coverage in Utah, Jason Chaffetz, the former Republican congressman and Fox News contributor. And here with me, Lucy Caldwell, a strategist and advisor to Renew Democracy. Jason, much of the media are just dismissing this Biden impeachment probe, playing it down, moving on quickly, insisting there's no evidence. Is the press, in your view, playing defense for Joe Biden?
Yeah, they lack the intellectual curiosity to actually question why were these 20 LLCs set up? Where did Hunter Biden do to deserve millions of dollars that went into the accounts of the immediate family members of Joe Biden? This is not an impeachment inquiry of Hunter Biden. It's an impeachment inquiry of Joe Biden because he does appear compromised, and they're stonewalled. They won't provide the documents. They won't answer the questions. They won't make people in the administration available. And the House was left with no other option other than an impeachment inquiry. It strengthens their legal hand.
Well, I was really surprised the next day just looking at major news homepages, and the Biden impeachment story was sort of the 8th story or the 9th story down. And in the last couple of days, you need a microscope to find it. So, Lucy, there are unanswered questions about checks and payments with money from foreign outfits. Not saying anything has been proven, but how can the media so easily dismiss an impeachment inquiry?
Well, I'm actually not quite sure what case you're making here, because if, in fact, I think an impeachment inquiry by Republicans against Joe Biden is going to really, really help Joe Biden in 2024. So if the media were carrying water for Joe and Hunter Biden on this particular story, I have to say, I think that they would be covering this from the rooftops.
Why will it help Joe Biden?
It helps Joe Biden because these impeachment inquiries, as we know from recent history, actually warm a president's base to him. We saw that in both Trump impeachments. There's also the problem, I think, in this particular impeachment, that there does not seem to be a there. Hunter Biden is a person with addiction, with perhaps mental illness. It's a very sad story. Joe Biden did things as a father that many people struggle with how to help their children. But the reality is that I think this impeachment inquiry is actually going to cause a lot of Americans to see their own story in the story of the Bidens, obviously with the caveat that they're a powerful family with more resources, but of the experience of trying to help a loved one who's really struggling.
Well, Joe Biden should not have gotten on calls with Hunter's business partners
Agreed.
or lunches.
Agreed.
I mean, there are things that they've
Agreed.
kind of moved the goalposts. So, Jason, go back to Hunter Biden. He shows up. He's ripping the Republicans. He's saying, I'm here. I'm ready to testify. Knowing that the House committee had already said there's no way the subpoena calls for something else. It was political theater. Was it effective political theater?
No, absolutely not. I mean, he was thumbing the nose at the committee. Imagine if you showed up to a judge and said, hey, I'm not going to come in the courtroom. I'm actually just going to go out and have a press conference. You'd be thrown in jail for doing that. You know what? When they issued subpoenas and on the Trump kids, they showed up and they testified for hours. That's the law. That's what you're supposed to do. And the idea that you were available, you were on campus, you were on the Senate side, and Hunter Biden goes out and says, I'm here and I'm available. Well, you have to do a deposition. That's the rules. That is the law. That is what you have to do. It's not optional to show up. And it strengthened the vote, by the way, in the House later that afternoon to actually do the impeachment inquiry. They demonstrated they're not going to provide the witnesses. They're not going to provide the documents. They're going to hide everything that they can. And the House has to be able to do its job.
Yeah, Hunter did go to the Senate side of the Capitol because theoretically he could have been arrested if he went to the House side. But Lucy, did Hunter Biden, who most people never heard speak, I think, before this, succeed in generating sympathetic coverage?
I think he probably did, because I think that what he put on display was the fact that the committee doesn't want him to testify in public. And I think that Americans like sunlight, Americans like transparency, Americans, just as they probably want to see these documents, also are interested in seeing Hunter Biden testify publicly.
But do you think this stunt helped him?
I don't think that this press conference was as glitzy
Wasn't
or
a press
effective.
conference because there's no questions.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Was this press event as effective as it could have
Right.
been? I don't know, but I think actually Hunter Biden using his own voice and speaking to the press and developing a narrative of Hunter being out there in the open, yes, I think that will help him, and I think it will help his father.
I bet Jason has a different view, but I want to play a soundbite because Speaker Mike Johnson first authorized this impeachment inquiry on his own, and now he's come back and gotten House approval, which is an important thing if you look at past impeachments. But here is what Mike Johnson, as a congressman, said back in 2019.
The founders of this country warned against a single-party impeachment for good reason. They feared that it would bitterly and perhaps irreparably divide our nation.
So, Jason, one-party impeachments are fine, are terrible, I should say, when Donald Trump is the target, but for Joe Biden, not so much?
Well, they haven't impeached him yet. This was a vote to do the inquiry, to go get the evidence, to get the documents, to have the testimony, to subpoena the bank records, to do all of that. You have to be able to do the investigative record. And the reason you have to do that is because you have IRS officials who are demonstrating and documenting that they were thwarted by the Department of Justice to actually do their jobs. The Department of Justice should have done this years ago, but they didn't do it. And when the IRS whistleblowers, highly credible, came in and said, we weren't allowed to do all these things, only the House can do that. So we'll see where it goes. But this is not an impeachment. It's the inquiry to get the evidence.
Yeah, I want to remind someone, when we're talking about one-party impeachment, we mean do members of another party cross over to participate with the party that's driving. In both of the Trump impeachments, that did happen. In the impeachment after January 6th, 10 Republicans backed the Trump impeachment, 10 House Republicans, the highest number ever in an impeachment of a president of their own party. And in fact, in the 2019 impeachment, there also was crossover because Republican Congressman Justin Amash, who had become an independent, he supported the impeachment. And newsflash, Justin Amash is not a Democrat, and he would be very offended. Yes, the inquiry is different, but I think this is a completely different animal. Well,
Could the impeachment inquiry, Jason, which ultimately has to lead on some kind of vote to proceed or not proceed with articles against the president, energize the Republican base, or is there some chance it could backfire?
If they step too far, anything could backfire. But I to suggest that this is going to rally Democrats. I mean, I guess the hardcore Democrats are going to say, oh, yeah. But look at how Joe Biden has morphed on his answer. I've never had a conversation, and now it's morphed time after time after time, never involved in the business. Now he's saying he wasn't financially involved in the business. But there are tens of millions of dollars that went into the pocket of the immediate family members of Joe Biden. $100,000 went into the bank account of his grandkids as a thank you for referring business to get into Romania. So come on, America is going to wake up to this, even though the traditional standard media is not properly reporting it. It should be front page day after day.
Well, I think the media have somehow decided that this is not a big story. But of course, as the inquiry goes on, that may change. There are unanswered questions, absolutely. But Lucy, Hunter Biden, we seem to be talking about him more and more. He's got this counterpunching strategy now, but he's also under indictment on tax charges, on gun charges. Is he hurting his father? Inevitably, it is at the very least, a distraction, correct?
I don't think Hunter Biden should be elected president in 2024, Howie. We should not elect Hunter Biden president. Hunter Biden, yes, it is a distraction. Republicans are succeeding in making this a distraction.
You're throwing
Hunter
him under the bus.
Is not. Hunter Biden is not the candidate. Hunter Biden is not the candidate. Would Hunter Biden have gotten these kinds of contracts from Burisma, these kinds of, without the entree of being Joe Biden's son? No, of course not. Should Joe Biden have taken calls with Hunter Biden's business associates? No, of course not. Do those kinds of activities, which seem like poor judgment calls, mount to something that would justify an impeachment? We're going to learn. And I think that what everyone will see is, no, they also do not.
Well, we will see. Hunter Biden obviously could wind up in jail with these felony indictments. Let me get a break here. When we come back, Harvard's president keeps her job despite her disastrous testimony about anti-Semitism, and some journalists are making the debate racial.
I'm Steve Doocy.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.